G'day everyone, welcome back to another Loaded Dice Plays video. I am Loaded Dice. First of all, I just want to say apologies in the delay in this one. Real world has just been a little bit hectic, so it's just been a bit of a difficult time to try to make time to do a recording, but we managed to get there in the end. Also, just quietly for those playing along at home, I did, as of recording, I've just managed to go 5-0 in the later Season 9, so go me. That's practically my ticket into the top cut, which is nice for my second season. But enough of that stuff. I did get a few complaints. The last video was a bit too long and a bit too rambly, so we'll move on as quick as we can, and we'll try to get this guy nutted out pretty quick. So this is the Sentinel Mark 4 Prime, and if you haven't seen the last episode where we just cover the generic Sentinel Mark 4s, I do recommend watching that one first, just because this video is pretty much going to be this guy's like the Sentinel Mark 4, just better in almost every way. So go watch that one first, because it has a lot of context for this one coming up. So with that, if we have a look at this Sentinel Mark 4 Prime, the Prime is very similar to the Mark 4s in his stat line. So all of his defensive stats are the same, with the exception of his stamina. Instead of being 7 on the front, he is 10. And spoiler alert, on the back, he is 8 instead of 6. He is still size 5, he is threat 5 instead of 4, and he is a short mover. So has the same immunities, has flight. So he's very similar to the Mark 4s. He pretty much just gets a bit of a stamina buff and a points bump. So if we start looking at his data sheet, we'll just run through that as quick as we can, top to bottom. His Plasma Blast Mark 2, it's very similar to the Sentinel's generic Plasma Blast, with the exception that it has 1 extra dice. So if you have a look at the Plasma Blast, it is a range 3, 5 dice energy attack. Energy is always a little bit more spicy to have than physical for the most part, and it has the same paying power to add dice as the generic Sentinels do as well. So this can be, if you're willing to pay the power, it can be an 8 dice attack at range 3, which can generate your power. Not a bad way to generate power. So if we move on to the Suppression Protocols Mark 2, it's very similar to the generic Mark 4 Sentinel. The only two differences here is that it's 9 dice instead of 8, and it is cost 4 instead of 3. So it actually is a pretty significant power jump from 3 to 4. So I think that kind of goes to show how good Suppression Protocols Mark 1, I guess, is on the normal generic Sentinels, because a 3 cost 8 dice is pretty bloody good. So a 4 cost 9 dice. It's still pretty good. You have to roll 9 dice here, but it does cost 4, and I think, kind of, again, foreshadowing a bit, I think when we get to the end of it, we'll work out that I think the Suppression Protocols aren't going to be used too much, just because he's going to use his power on a few other things here and there. So with that, let's move down the list. Mutant Hunters, Affiliation Sentinel. So the Sentinel Mark 4 Prime, he is a leader. He is the leader of the Sentinels. Let's run through this affiliation leadership ability. When an enemy character is dazed, after the effect is resolved, choose a number of allied characters up to the day's character's threat value. Each chosen character gains 1 power. A character cannot gain more than 1 power as a result of this leadership ability per turn. So what does that really mean? So we don't get any power for KOing a character, which it's talked about being good, bad, ugly. Like, I think by the time characters are realistically getting KO'd, there's usually a influx of power at that stage of the game anyway, your turns 3 and 4. So characters getting smashed up and beaten up, or they're using their builders. So that extra power, I'm not going to miss it that much, but it's definitely, this leadership as a whole is probably on the low end of leaderships. It's functionally a power gain leadership, but only triggers off dazed characters, and that's probably how it's going to function. It is a weird one to really look at, because if someone's playing tall and you are also playing tall, you're only going to get, if you daze all 3 of their characters, that's like a maximum of 3 or 4 power each daze. So the way the power kind of works out, it's funny. It's not terrible, but it's really not great. So it does probably promote if you're playing against someone going wider, and you can pop this off, once or twice a turn. That's kind of cool. But for me, it's not a leadership that you're going to write home about, and it's not a leadership that you can build around as well, where I think Steve Rogers is kind of talked about a lot, but the Steve Rogers of the world, you can actually put characters into your list to build around his leadership, and other characters have the same deal. You can, Sam Wilson, you put a bunch of 2s and 3s in the list because you want to play around his leadership. It's not, for me, this isn't leadership that you're building around. It's just a nice added bonus. This is what you get because you want to play Sentinels. You're not playing Sentinels because you want to play this leadership. If you keep moving down the list, he has restraint cables. It's I'm pretty sure it's exactly the same as the Sentinel Mark 4s, so it's range 4, short push towards this character. It's great, no size limit, so it's absolutely fine. Pattern analysis is a new one for the Sentinels, so this is, I think the best way to think of it is think Shuri. It's rerolls. So if we read them out, it's pattern analysis, cost is X. While this character or an allied character within 4 is attacking, defending during the modified dice step of the attack, this character may spend up to 3 power to use a superpower. For each power spent, this character or the allied character may reroll 1 dice. So pay power, get that many rerolls. 1 for 1 is really nice, especially if you only want to reroll 1. I know you got those people like, what's his name, Heimdall, where it's cost 2 for 2. Sometimes you only want to reroll 1 dice, and you don't want to spend 2 power. So this is probably one of the best reroll abilities, power for effect, I would say, in the game. Just being able to pay your X power, up to 3, reroll that many dice. Range 4 is also very spicy. It's such a big range, especially on a large base like he has. And he wants to play your game probably front and center, hand out the rerolls, just be in that mid board and shooting out plasma blasts and funding the ability to push out rerolls. He has a power matrix, which is very similar to the other ones. I'm going to say very similar. It is exactly the same as the Sentinel Mark 4s. So ends his activation, gains 2 power. Can be very handy with this guy because he wants to end his activation, gets you 2 power. That means you've got 2 rerolls online for the rest of your team. Very handy. Sentinel programming, it's the same as the other Sentinels where he can't be messed around by mystic attacks, and he gets the wilds count as 2 successes on mystic attacks. So very handy for the mystic matchup, and he has flight, immunity, bleed, poison, etc, etc, etc. So all in all, he's very similar, with the exception of he has a leadership. He has this cool reroll bubble. Hey everyone, sorry about that. Just had a bit of issues with the recording. It seems to have stopped recording after I did the healthy side. So I'm just going to jump in and keep recording now, and we will continue on with the injured side of the Sentinel Prime. So let's just carry on, shall we? So as we can see, the injured side to the healthy side is very similar. The only thing he seems to lose is the 2 stamina, which it's fine. 18 stamina and a 5 threat. It's actually great. As we said before, his defensive stats and tech is a bit limiting. So that 18 health pool is going to be probably his main defense, I guess you would say, as a 5 threat. 18 health, and he has the ability to pay for rerolls, so it's not too bad, but that's his main defensive stats there. The only other thing that changes is his power core. Instead of being a power matrix, it turns into the overloading power core rule. So the overloading power core reads, during the power phase, roll 5 dice for each crit and hit rolled. This character gains 1 power. If he rolls at least 1 skull, he suffers 1 damage. So it means you don't have that same feels bad as Red Skull, where if you roll 3, 4, 5 skulls, you're taking that much damage. It's just capped at 1. So that's very nice. Very nice with his 8 health left. So not too bad there. He's not going to blow himself up anytime soon. The other thing to note there is it's not hit, crit, wild. It's only crit and hit. So that's a 3 out of 8. So you're looking at about 2 successes on average, but 1 to 3 is probably what you would expect when you're rolling this at the power phase. But at the same stage, the way the dice work, you can get 5, you can get 0, okay? So, but I think 1 to 3 is about what you're going to be expecting, and you should be happy with 2. So the thing with this, though, is he does get to start the turn with that extra power. So if he gets flipped with 0 power, he's probably going to get his 1 for the start of the turn, and then potentially 2 more from this overloading power core to start his turn with 3, which means he can juice up his plasma blast, which doesn't change, unlike the original Sentinels. So it's pretty handy to be able to have that power at the start of the turn. So the way I see that playing out as well is when he's on his healthy side and hasn't been dazed yet, if he's full up with power or even like 5+ power, I think I'd be inclined to use his rerolls. I'd be a little bit more frivolously. Just chuck them out there. If someone's getting hit and you're rolling badly, just spend the power to reroll a few failed successes. Just because when if he takes that last 1 or 2 damage that he might be on, gets flipped, and then he's going to start the next turn. He's going to be able to roll this overloading power core, and all of a sudden he's still got 5, 6, 7, 8 power, depending how well you roll. But otherwise, I think he's pretty much the same as his front side, so there's not too much to go over here. He's going to be, the way I see him playing, so just talking a little bit overall and holistically with him, the way I see him playing is just whenever he gets his power, he'll start juicing up that plasma blast, just trying to gain as much power, being able to deal damage while still having a bit of a power parity, you would say, where he's putting in 3 power, he's going to try to get 3 power back for the most part, and then using the power that he sits on from his from the power matrix or the overloading power core, depending which side he's on, using that for a lot of rerolls. That's pretty much the main way I see him playing out. The affiliation as a whole is something worth talking about. It's a funny one with Cassandra Nova. I probably won't do an episode on her just because I don't feel confident in being able to truly evaluate her card. I don't think she's she's not much of a meta pick, and she's not someone I've really considered too much. I've actually not played her myself personally, so doing a video on her might be a bit funny for me. I'm not too sure if I want to devote that time to her, but we can just have a look at her and understand that she has mystic attacks. So having a look at that affiliation as a whole, they do have a good mixture of attacks. If you think of Bucky as a little bit of a pseudo-affiliated character for them, if you have Bucky, Sentinels, and Cassandra Nova, there's a good swathe of attacks. There's mystic, there's energy, there's physical, there's also your big dice pulls from suppression protocols, and there's also your pitter-paddle shots from Bucky as well. One thing of note with them, though, is that they don't have any real displacement when it comes to throws. So there's like no real throws in those 3-4 characters. The Sentinels, Sentinel Prime, Nova, and even Bucky. There's no throws. So there's a little bit of displacement with the restraint cables. Nova has a little bit of funny movement shenanigans going on. But when it comes to the guaranteed damage that a lot of your attrition teams like to be able to have guaranteed damage from throws, these characters are not going to be bringing those to the table. One of the cool things that the 3 Sentinels bring, though, is their immunity to poison, so you may want to consider taking them on Terrigen. The other thing is web lining or restraint cabling things off of points on your Terrigen Miss is a pretty cool ability, especially if you think that the way those pushes work, you ignore your own base. So being able to push things through your own large base or around your large base, that can be kind of cool, and also can be worth a bit of points if you can get that displacement off. When it comes to other crisis they might want to be interested in, I do like them on Gamma just because they are a difficult model to shift, the Sentinels themselves that is. So they can be difficult to shift, and also they take up a lot of real estate around that Gamma shelter. So it can also just be difficult at times for your opponent to even get into that range 1 of a Gamma crisis token. So probably the last thing I'll mention is just Bucky. I think he enjoys having these Sentinels around just to use Hydro Tactics off of their large base. The Primes rerolls is also pretty good for Bucky just to try to generate that hit for the rapid fire. I think that's pretty much it, though. I don't want to go into this affiliation as a whole too much. That's pretty much them rounded out. I will leave the tactics cards open. I might chuck a few videos up of those, even if I just do the good ones, I think, or try to shotgun a few of the not-so-good ones in a row. But for now, that's pretty much the Sentinels wrapped up. I do have an event tomorrow as of recording, and I'm going to bring the Hydra out. So depending on how I go, I might actually revisit Hydra and revisit the character cards individually. It depends how I go. If I bomb out, I might just call it quits and move on to Avengers or something. But if I go all right, I might do a quick review on the characters and also how they went. So until next time, I'll see you later. Cheers.